We'll get to Mean Girls coming up, I promise. But first, the mean truth. As we mentioned, today's new CBS poll shows the president's approval at its lowest ever, 37%. That's a 9-point drop in just 1 month. The CBS poll is lower than recent polls from NBC, The Washington Post, or Quinnipiac. The poll also finds fewer Americans approve of the Affordable Care Act. 31% of Americans approve of it. That's a 12-point drop since October, and it's thanks mostly to declining approval among independents and some Democrats. Still, it's not all bad news for the president's health care law here. The poll found only 43% of Americans say the ACA should be repealed. A larger plurality, about 48%, it just needs some changes. Meanwhile, on Capitol Hill Tuesday, one of the men who built healthcare.gov testified that up to 40% of the IT systems for the site still need to be built. And at another congressional hearing, cybersecurity experts said the entire website might need to be taken offline and rebuilt. Joining us at the table is John Stanton, a longtime Hill reporter who's BuzzFeed's Washington bureau chief. He was recently featured in the BuzzFeed listicle, 23 reasons why John Stanton should be on the Hill's most beautiful people list.
I love that listicle.
Yeah, it's a good one. Welcome.
Wait, first comments on that?
My mom loved it.
Well, and I heard your mom loves listicles.
She does.
Yeah. He's a BuzzFeed fan. Let's get right to some of what you've been doing. You interviewed Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi yesterday for BuzzFeed Brews. She talked about the branding of the Affordable Care Act. Let's take a listen.
Yes, they could have done a better job in describing it. No, they didn't hurt us for 2014. I'm really disappointed that the technology, you can just imagine coming from Northern California what I think of that. Notice I always call it the Affordable Care Act. I've always called it the Affordable Care Act. Because everybody may not love Obama, but everybody loves affordable. And I love them both.
a lot of love in that room there. Yeah. The first question for you, though, obviously talking to her, she's speaking to a branding challenge that a lot of Democrats have had. They tried to sort of embrace and pump up Obamacare, but beyond the Obama piece, which she spoke to, isn't there also a problem that deeming it Obamacare makes it sound like a product rather than what it really is, which is a set of rules, regulation, and interstate funding?
Absolutely. And I think, also there was this, I think, notion within the White House that they should embrace it to try to take the power out of it with the Republicans were using against them. But it has definitely turned back against them. Now that things are sort of, not going well with the website. Again, like you say, it becomes a product that they're being sold, and this undercuts a lot of the things that have already happened with the law. They did not do a good job of telling people about, for instance, the fact that if you're a kid, you can stay on your parents' insurance, pre-existing conditions for children, things like that. All those things were done last year. So the law has actually already been in place, and they've done a very poor job of saying this is just one small part of this sort of now 2-year process of putting this in place. And, I understand why they're trying to back out of the Obamacare branding or rebranding that they did, but I'm not sure that at this point it's gonna work for them.
Although you have to say they could have come up with something catchier than the Affordable Care Act to start with.
Like Obamacare.
Like Obamacare. Democrat.
Obamacare.
John, I have to point out, apparently the cycle team finds you sexy enough. They just booted me right out of my seat, so I hope you're enjoying it.
I apologize. All
right, so we're now 10 days before the administration's self-imposed deadline, and we've been assured that the federal side will be improved and functioning, but the realities appear less assuring. As Ari mentioned a little bit earlier, you have the chief architect for the Federal Exchange testifying yesterday on the Hill that 30 to 40% of the project is still being built. We're talking the payment and accounting portions of the site, which, yes, don't need to be operational until 2014, but still, John, this suggests a problem that won't be fixed anytime soon. So why not just listen to these tech experts who are saying, hey, let's just press the pause button until we actually get things up and running properly? Maybe I'm crazy, but that just seems like the rational thing to do.
Well, I mean, that it does on one side, but it does create a whole series of policy problems that if you create a 6-month or a year-long delay and you sort of allow this process to sort of go forward, there are the serious policy implications that come along with it. And politically, I think the White House also wants to try to muscle through this as hard as they can to try to get past it. They don't want to have this thing come back and sort of bite them in the butt again in 3 months or 4 months. And so I think that they're trying to not have that kind of a dynamic sort of linger.
Look, if they'd had a conservative opposition that was more cooperative, just relatively cooperative, then they could talk about maybe delay, but we have this defund fantasy caucus. So any delay leads to defunding, leads to trying to end the law. But I want to deal with the idea that how this plays out politically will actually work state by state and not just as a national sort of piece. How Obamacare or the ACA is working in each state is going to make the difference in how it plays politically. As Slate points out, exchange enrollment is surging in states that have working websites that are not trying to fight against the law and obstruct the law. California, Kentucky, Minnesota, Washington State, Connecticut are all surpassing enrollment expectations, right? So it's going to depend on where you are and how it's working out. We're already seeing attack ads on the air in red states where it's not working out so well. Let's show the one being used by the Koch brothers against Kay Hagan.
People don't like political ads. I don't like them either. But healthcare isn't about politics. It's about people. It's not about a website that doesn't work. It's not about poll numbers or approval ratings. It's about people. And millions of people have lost their health insurance. Millions of people can't see their own doctors. And millions are paying more and getting less. Obamacare doesn't work. It just doesn't work. Tell Senator Hagan to stop thinking about politics and start thinking about people.
I wish you could have had a split screen to see how hard Crystal was laughing as we were showing that out. And even John Stanton is laughing yourself. Now, meanwhile, in nearby Kentucky, which has a great state-based exchange, it's working very well, things are getting a little bit tougher for Mitch McConnell, as Brian Boitler points out in Salon. As minority leader with the primary challenger from the Tea Party, McConnell has to be leading the vanguard of the ACA opposition. But as a Kentucky senator and a candidate with a strong general election opponent ahead of him, he's soon going to be running on a platform of taking insurance away from tens, if not hundreds of thousands of his own constituents. So how this thing's going to play out will depend on where you are.
Yes, I agree to a certain extent. However, I would point out that if you look at the way people view these kind of things, oftentimes people conflate, for instance, local regulations with the EPA, right? And I think Republicans are banking on that happening here, that in a state like Kentucky where there is sort of an operating system that is essentially Obamacare and it's starting to get up on its feet, people are going to look at that as a state thing, and they're not going to conflate the two things, even though they actually are the same thing, and that McConnell is going to be able to continue his Obamacare attacks. But it is going to become tricky if that kind of a dynamic doesn't play out.
Yeah, I mean, people may well be signing up through Kentucky Connect and never even realizing that this has anything to do with Obamacare. You may recall, John, that not that long ago, the Republicans shut down the government in a move that I would say was damaging and delusional. But they shut it down over health care. You know, is that part of the Republican caucus feeling sort of vindicated right now and emboldened to try the same thing all over again in the new year?
They're definitely feeling vindicated. But it's interesting, actually, the problems that the administration is having now is actually making those people less inclined to try to shut down the government again, which is a sort of a counterintuitive notion, I think. You know, they've told us that they don't see much reason to try to make the government funding bill or the debt ceiling right now contingent on Obamacare, which I think that they feel like, you know, the White House is doing enough damage to themselves that they don't have to try to step in on that. So.
One last question before we let you go, John. Who's that on your left arm?
That is St. Francis de Sales. He's the patron saint of reporters.
Can you show Tommy so we can see? Because it's really good piece of ink there.
Let me tell you something. The next time we have you on, John Stanton, we're going to find out whether you have more tattoos or more skull rings. That's a macro tease for the next time you're on the cycle. Thanks for being here.
Macro tease.